Hey, thanks for tuning in. It seems with every video we become a more and more exclusive group of people, so I'm glad that you're still here to enjoy the recommendations that I have for you. Now, today is going to be all about big ideas, fantastical suggestions, not so much comedy, not so much rap this week. It's all about stimulating your mind and, of course, giving some inspiration to your YouTube recommendations feed. Today's first video is a TED Talk, came out recently. It's about the idea of how we interact with our democratic system, essentially making the case that democracy has a crappy user interface and suggesting a solution. So the main problem that he poses is that when you have a representative representing thousands or millions of people, you're inevitably going to have a lot of loss of data quality, in the sense that you have a very nuanced and specific set of political beliefs, but your representative has to make a compromise amongst all of the political beliefs of all of their constituents, or at least the ones who vote for them. So this suggestion is to use virtual agents, programs, which are actually going to get to know you and your unique political ideology and represent your unique political ideology with much higher fidelity on a large scale. So obviously there are some problems that you could criticize with this idea. And this video does acknowledge some of those problems. And there are also some really interesting developments you could build on top of this if it did work. And this video also hints at some of those. So check it out. One thing I found interesting is I think that this idea is a little bit generalizable, in the sense that we don't just have to use this concept for democracy. This is an idea that I've heard before in the context of dating. Like if you had a computer algorithm that didn't just have your photo in it, but it had your political opinions, your musical tastes, your sense of humor, all of these things bundled into one, your virtual agents could actually liaise without you doing anything to find someone with whom you're romantically compatible. You could also use this for finding new friendships or for finding employees. I think there's a lot of possibilities here. So let me know what you think. Do you think that this is a terrible idea for democracy? Is this an inspiring idea that gets you a bit excited? And would you trust a virtual agent to find a date for you instead of you having to swipe through a bunch of photos on Tinder? Today's second video is actually a really interesting one because it's about something that I normally give no thought to at all, and that is geopolitics in Africa. So it turns out that there's 6 East African nations which are looking at creating a federation, kind of like how the United States have federated into the United States of America. So this is a really interesting video that looks at the potential for cultural cohesion, the economic potential of uniting these various states, and it goes into a fairly in-depth analysis, particularly also comparing it to other countries. So you get a sense of what this new country would be and where it would stand on the world stage. So there's not much I can say because I don't know much else about these African countries. Do you? Do you think that there are any obvious flaws with this plan? Do you think that there are any interesting consequences that could arise out of this in terms of geopolitics in the African region or even their interactions with the rest of the world? Let me know. I'm really looking for some new input and opinions on this topic. Okay, so one of my favorite YouTube channels is Smarter Every Day. I've been watching his videos for years now. This is one that I think is particularly relevant, and it's looking at the way in which we share news media, specifically the way in which we share news media that fits our ideology without thinking to potentially fact check it. So this video goes over some of the basic tools that you can use, some of the basic approaches for fact checking, so that you can make sure that when you're sharing things, you're not contributing to false news. Because sometimes, even if the news fits a narrative that you know to be true, the facts themselves could have been altered to exaggerate its contribution to that narrative. This also introduces a social media company called MediaWise, which is specifically devoted to helping people develop these fact-checking skills, and where people are unsure, doing a bit of extra research for them to help them out. So definitely recommend you check it out. If you're big on any social media platform, you should also look into MediaWise. They share a lot of tips for how you can be a better netizen and what you can do to make sure that your social contribution to news and political dialogue is constructive and not contributing to fake news and propaganda, essentially. I also want to know, do you ever share news without fact checking it? Do you think it's realistic to expect most people to fact check the news they share? Do you think it matters? Is it important? Are we going to figure out the truth either way? Or is there really a problem with the way that news is shared these days? Okay, so video 4 today is from a YouTuber named Vihart, who I actually proposed to in my first episode. She's one of my favorite YouTubers in the math space because she presents simple math ideas that most people would probably find boring in a way that is imaginative and creative and really, sets your mind alight with the possibilities and the way that math can be used as an artistic tool and not just an analytical one. So this particular video is focused on the number 2. Again, ideas most people might think are boring, but it's done in a way that is very creative. It's relatably childish and also technically quite witty. I definitely recommend you check it out. Suitable for people with no math literacy and also people like myself who most others would probably consider maths nerds. All right, the final video today is a talk from South by Southwest by George Hotz, who's a hacker famous for being the first person to jailbreak an iPhone. And this talk, as I said, it's a little bit longer. It's almost an hour long, and it's him exploring the simulation hypothesis, which is a metaphysical idea most famously espoused by Elon Musk. Now, I think that the simulation hypothesis has a lot of ethical pitfalls because I think it essentially justifies subjugating other people, gaming the system, manipulating society. However, George Hotz has a refreshingly audacious and subversive take on it, where he says that if we are in a simulation, the goal is not to get the most money, to have the most likes, to win on points. He says really what our goal should be is to escape the simulation. Now, he has some interesting ideas based on real-world examples that could potentially inform how we could begin to do this. And it really got my mind going. I mean, I'm not on the simulation hypothesis bandwagon at all, but one interesting thought I had is perhaps if we are in a simulation, the very purpose of the simulation is to escape. I mean, if we wanted to figure out how to escape the simulation we are in, wouldn't it make sense to run a bunch of simulations at a very high speed to see if any of them can communicate with us or escape into our reality? Because, you see, if they could do that, we could learn from how they did it to try and come up with techniques to allow us to do the same thing. Maybe we're in this giant nested chain of simulations where the entire goal of each one is to break out so that the one above it can learn from them and do the same thing. Anyway, what do you think? What do you think about the simulation hypothesis? What do you think about George Hotz and his potential plan to start a church? And do you agree with me that there are some ethical problems? And, why do you think our simulation would exist? Are we just a video game for someone's entertainment, or could we be some sort of scientific experiment by which the higher level hopes to learn something? So those are all the videos for today. I hope that you watch them and that you find them really interesting. Definitely share them, particularly Vihart. She's a darling, and that video is really entertaining. Tune back in next week. It's possible in the meantime I'm going to put up some stuff about Token the Rapper. I have still been listening to him all the time, and I've been learning some interesting details about a beef he's having with Eminem. So I may do a little bit of a lyric analysis to let you guys in on some of the insights I've had into exactly what the back and forth between these two rappers is. Anyway, have a great week. I hope you're getting some better YouTube recommendations now that you're feeding it these more interesting videos, and looking forward to next week.